Why don't police officers have to pass a bar exam? For similar reasons, lawyers don't arrest people on the street. Because it isn't their job to know the ins and outs of the law at the side of the road or argue the finer points. That's what the courts are for. Besides, if they pass the bar, why would they take a downgrade in pay to be an officer when they can make tons of money being a lawyer? Because they don't want to be lawyers. Same reason a nurse does not need to go to medical school. They are nurses, not doctors. Lots of bar stuff is not useful to the cops. For example, how to draft a contract or protect an intellectual property. Cop needs to know criminal procedures for sure, but that does not need to pass a bar exam. A lot of professions need to know laws of their field very well, but no need for them to know laws of other fields. Bar exam is not designed for them. Bar exam sets the minimal requirements for a lawyer or judge prosecutor to know all fields of law. Ex-cop, law student here. The short answer is it's a different job. Lawyers have to have an understanding of the law beyond what's written down in a statute. Their job is to understand tension between different legal principles, interpret the law accordingly, and then advocate for the person or organization they represent. A cop's job is to worry about public safety first and then apply a more mechanical knowledge of the law, but usually without the luxury of time. If you can pass the bar, you're too smart to be a cop. Because then you have to pay bar salaries for every single one of them. The bar exam isn't just about knowing the law. The bar is the low wall that divides the courtroom. The well is where lawyers, barristers, the judge or magistrate, and the court staff work. The gallery is where the public sits. Passing the bar is about being allowed in the well as a member of the court. Anyone who thinks a cop should take the bar clearly doesn't know what the bar is. A cop doesn't need to know how to debate in court, they're not lawyers. They don't need to know how to actually their way around a suit. All their job entails is to enforce criminal law. Because they aren't lawyers? Because the bar exam is largely irrelevant to my responsibilities as a law enforcement officer. They enforce the law. They don't legislate or judge it. Because they are armed thugs, not lawyers. Their job is to scare you into not committing crimes in the first place with a minor public safety objective. This would be so useful. Next time I get a traffic ticket, the police officer can do my last will and testament and certify my home sale. Bottom line, you would never have anywhere near enough officers. The washout rate of police academies is incredibly high. If you add another hurdle, especially something as demanding as the bar exam, you're going to whittle that number of graduates down by a lot. Because we'd have no police officers. Well, there'd be no cops for one. We'd have no police officers. Well, I know this is meant in an American context, but the gist of the question is not bad. If you ignore the obvious points about the bar exam being the wrong metric. Where I live, and as far as I know also in the rest of Europe, cops do have to study and pass a certain level of criminal law to graduate. That is part of why you need the equivalent of a bachelor's degree to become a cop here. Because they aren't lawyers, they have their own exam. Understanding the laws you enforce? Leave that to the judge, jury and lawyer Baha. I would say there really isn't a bar to pass in America. While in Europe they are required to be educated more on policing. Because cops are not lawyers. The people who want to be cops and the people who should be cops are never the same people. Unfortunately, they have to lower standards to keep places staffed. Police officers do have to pass a final test to pass BLET Police Academy. So in a sense they're already doing what you're proposing. There's already a lot of time spent on constitutional rights. As far as the specific bar exam, the police aren't the ones who are doing the prosecuting. They have to identify whether a crime has been committed. But once it gets to court, the police officer is part of the evidence but not doing the actual prosecuting. It's the police's job to enforce the law, not interpret, change it or create the law. Police who make their own judgment calls about the law usually end up on the news. Are those audit the police YouTube videos? Bold of you to assume they could. No one would do that for $28,000 a year. They can barely hire anyone as it is. It's hard enough to get people to want to be a police officer as is lol. They kinda do, their bar is just lower. Because then we'd have to pay them a living wage. Well, you wouldn't have nearly enough police for one. You'd have to put vigilante law into place because there wouldn't be nearly enough cops to deter crime. They'd be understaffed. Not the bar, but maybe a basic test about laws and rights. Because they were all high school students and they wouldn't pass. They want obedient police officers, not smart police officers. Not only do they not have to pass any significant law exam. If your IQ test's too high, they won't hire you. This is not a joke. Because we will have no police. They need them just smart enough to follow orders and not smart enough to question authority. Because it isn't their job to actually know anything. Because they couldn't. Because the job doesn't pay enough to warrant learning for it. Cops should be paid and trained better. But that will never happen when their wages come from tax dollars that people will refuse to increase for it. This not a stupid question because cops don't even be knowing the laws half the time. They give the most unqualified people the opportunity to mess up anyone's life with a quick judgment, and not to mention how they make money from writing tickets. They can't cram that into the whole 20 hours of training they receive. They don't know the law and are legally allowed to lie to you. Last Week Tonight with John Oliver had an episode on police, showing how some of them only get a few weeks of training before being basically given a license to kill. After seeing them train to raid a child-sacrificing cult without shooting themselves and then being ready to go, abuse power, misappropriate taxes and buy themselves some hardcore military equipment, not having to pass the bar exam? Yeah, you seem to severely underestimate how unqualified many police officers can be. You're hired to enforce the law, but you have no idea what the law is. They don't even have to pass high school. It's preferred they are stupid and obedient. Because they aren't required to have any understanding of the laws they try to enforce. That's not their job. It is their job to make as many accusations of illegal activity as possible. If they understood the law properly, there wouldn't be nearly as many accusations. It's a numbers game. It's far better to make 10,000 accusations and only have 10 of them stick than to make 900 accusations and 100 stick. The more cops know about the law, the less useful they are to the system. They deal with the blunt end of it. They aren't working out the complexities of a divorce case when arresting people for theft. I mean, why don't we just let judges do enforcement and sentencing all at once? We could call them street judges. Because they're not trying to be lawyers. They're not prosecuting or defending individuals. They know the basics of what's illegal and what's legal. That's all they need to know. Police aren't always dealing with the finer points of the law. Sometimes they're just dealing with people and their shit. You know how much harder it would be to have enough police if they all had to basically be lawyers? Because they aren't lawyers. Why don't plumbers have to go to medical school?